bring agencies together to reduce silos, build better coordination, and build better policies that really help positively impact vulnerable children and their families. One of our work streams is focused on empowering fathers and how we can help fathers be better engaged with their children. With that, we have a 10-point policy plan that one of which point is around how do we engage universities and colleges to adjust their curriculum to reflect sort of the newfound knowledge as well as the understanding, gender roles have changed, dads want to be more engaged, and how can we help make sure all of our health and human service providers, the next generation, are getting that education about it, including dads and being thoughtful about that when they are working out there. So we're super excited for today's conversation. We really want to tap your brains for ideas on how to do this work, how to do it better, and what would make it easier for you to implement this in your institutions. Thanks so much. I'll hand it back to Mike.
Thank you, Asia. Thank you for the Children's Cabinet's leadership and for harnessing the attention of Mayor Eric Adams and the Adams administration on the importance of responsible fatherhood. For DYCD's part, where we've operated a fatherhood initiative for some years, for over 20 years, where the focus historically has been on engaging non-custodial dads to better engage with their children and have a healthier co-parenting relationship with the custodial parents of those children. As a youth agency engaged in adult work, it has always made sense to try to uplift this conversation. The other thing I will give credit to my predecessors and colleagues at DYCD. Several years ago, DYCD worked with CUNY to establish the youth studies certification programs that are now in existence. And it has always made a lot of sense to us as an agency that supports a lot of youth work, that for folks who are looking to initiate and further develop their careers in youth services, certification and specific focus on how to work with that target population makes sense and strengthens workers' ability to perform and to grow in that field. So over the past several years, given DYC, particularly the past 2 years, given that DYC had those helpful conversations with CUNY, we begun investigating the issue that among disconnected adults, particularly those who might be served by fatherhood programs or jail or prisoner reentry programs or violence interruption programs or the like, that it might further strengthen their work in the field and help them grow in their careers if they could get targeted training and become more upskilled to be even more of service. So we've been happy to have these conversations with various colleagues at CUNY. I want to acknowledge Sarah Michelle Berkman. I want to acknowledge Amy Perez and several other units across CUNY to have the conversation as we began to engage with our great colleagues at AHRA and the Office of Child Support Services. We realized there was some synergy between the conversations and the lens we were using and the lens that HRA was using. And having said that, I see that our colleague, Fran Partisabedesa from HRA is here. So I will turn the stage over to her to say more about HRA's approach.
Sure. Thanks, Mike. I'd like to thank Aisha and Mike for putting this on today. And I'm really thrilled to have the opportunity to talk to you, talk about this topic. So let me give you just a little bit of background. In 2014, what we would do is go out to individual community-based organizations and talk about child support. But what we realized, and fairly not quickly, that the topic of fathers was sort of missing, and the knowledge of child support was lacking. And based on a lot of research that was done, and based in particular, we understood how important fathers are to the social development of children, that they're essential. They rather than being a secondary thought, they really should be primary. And we had this theory that, or belief that, social work schools were still defining family as mother and child. So we wanted to validate that theory. And why? Because our feeling was, if we go out to each program and talk to them about fathers and child support, that's not going to create sustainable change. Not when you have the turnover that you have. And there was no way we can, keep up with all the organizations. So we said, let's back up. So we first went to the New York State Consortium of Social Work Deans, and we asked them, is our theory correct? Is it true that most social work schools do still define family as mother and child? And so we got back from them, and the answer is yes. And once we got the answers yes, then we partnered with the Silverman School of Social Work at Hunter College, along with CUNY, to create a curriculum that emphasized fathers and the importance of fathers, and that a family should be defined as mother, father, child, and the father's not an afterthought or a secondary thought. And we were so pleased that this curriculum was actually um, taught by both Professor Menzies and Dr. Hayward, um, and which you'll hear, I guess, hear from today. And the one thing that I'm hoping we can talk about, I hope there'll be some space and time, is to explore how we can take this curriculum or a similar curriculum and and go beyond Columbia and soon I forgot who it was. I'm sorry, but go beyond New York City schools to New York State and even nationwide, because I don't think this is a unique problem to New York City. So I think if we really want sustainable change, we really need to examine the social work schools, the ones who go into the community-based organizations that work with families, and and reorient them. So I think this is to us, we felt very passionate about it. So thank you.
Thank you, Fran, and thank you, Asia. Next, I'm going to turn to Alan Farrell from HRA, Office of Child Support Services. You have some folks to introduce and bring to the stage.
Thank you very much, Mike. And again, I want to thank Asia, Badi, the team at the Children's Cabinet, as their whole team there, so Mike Bobbin, DYCD team, CUNY, and just all our partners. This is a wonderful milestone to be able to have this conversation, to hear from all the principals, certainly at Columbia and Stony Brook, which we're about to hear from, but also just hear from you in terms of your feedback on the value of this work. So just welcome everybody. And again, thank you. First, briefly, I'd like to introduce, and this is the kind of thing where these are folks that so many already know, but just briefly, I want to introduce Dr. Ron Mincy. He's a former professor at the Columbia School of Social Work. He's a special research scientist there at Columbia School of Social Work. He was a co-principal investigator of the future of fathers, future of families, and child well-being. And in July 2024, he retired from his appointment as the Maurice B. Russell Professor of Social Policy and Social Work Practice at Columbia, and where he directed again the Center for Fathers, Children, and Family Well-being. And he came to many of you know he came to Columbia University from the Ford Foundation, where he served as a senior program officer and developed Strengthening Fragile Family Initiative. He is a labor economist with expertise in urban economics, family demography, income security, policy, human development, especially among disadvantaged males. His research is undertaken at leading policy research, philanthropic, and academic institutions over the past 30 years, and we could go on and on about his work. He's a native New Yorker, born and educated in the Bronx Public Schools, and after graduating from honors from Harvard University, he earned his doctoral degree in economics at MIT. And Lord willing, he and his wife, Dr. Flona Mincy, we'll hear about in a minute and hear from, will celebrate their 50th year of marriage in September. And throughout their marriage, they've hosted in person, in home and online Bible studies and groups, and just really reached out to the community in so many ways. And so we're so thankful for Dr. Mincy to be here, Dr. Ron Mincy to be here with us. And we also have Dr. Flona Mincy as well. She's retired after a 4-decade career in higher education, human resource management, nonprofit management, and educational administration. Her most recent appointment was as adjunct assistant professor at Columbia University School of Social Work, where he taught courses on social welfare policy and fatherhood policy and practice. And for over 20 years, Dr. Mincy was a senior management trainer for the New York City Housing Authority, where she developed and delivered curricula in management, supervisory, and leadership development, organizational change management, and internship programs. So with all that said, again, we're just so happy to be there here. And for those who don't know me, apologies, I didn't introduce myself properly. Again, Alan Farrell, Assistant Deputy Commissioner for Parent and Community Engagement here at the Office of Child Support Services. It's my great pleasure to introduce again Dr. Ron Mincy and Dr. Flona Mincy as they share with us their experience at implementing the Fatherhood Social Work curriculum at the Columbia School of Social Work. After that, we'll hear from Dr. Ariana Hayward after their presentation. Thank you very much. Drs. Mincy, please.
Thank you so much. It's good, so good to see so many of you. I hope you can hear me well. Somebody nod your head. Good. So I think the main takeaway after having a prior version of this conversation that I want to share with you is that I think absolutely that the agenda that you are on, both to talk to leaders in the city and day-to-day case workers who work in many agencies around the city about the importance of fatherhood in the way they frame family services generally. I think that is critical. But I think the execution of it, and particularly the role of the course that Fran has taken the lead in developing and in which we participated maybe, over those years, the main takeaway is that it's really important for that infiltrating the social work profession and the social work education is to know the rules of the game of how social work programs in academia work. And I confess that even though I was 15 years in at the Columbia School of Social Work, by the time I got involved in this particular work, I did not understand the rules of the game of course selection, course adoption, and the like at Columbia. In part because I was trained as an economist, I got interested in fatherhood and came to the School of Social Work because it was a great place to do work on research on social work policy. And in the course that I taught on social work policy, I was able to integrate the information that we all know into that course. But I had never offered a new course at the School of Social Work, and therefore I didn't understand how the evolution of a new course in a social work program is closely tied to the accreditation of the social work program that occurs every few years and the competition that rolls around faculty for new courses. And not understanding that, we were not able to be successful in getting the course adopted because we didn't understand, again, the rules of the game. And those rules consisted of several things. First of all, in order to offer a new course, there was a trial period that the course offerer had to go through. And the idea was if during this trial period, students enrolled in the course gave it pretty positive reviews in terms of what they learned from the course and the like, then the course could migrate into the general curriculum. And the other thing I would say is that the school would also own the curriculum to the course, right? So these were things that I was not aware of. So when we began to teach the course, we could not get because the profession generally defines family, as Fran suggested, as women and children, the climate for the reception of this course was not very positive. The associate dean, who had the responsibility of sort of arranging the school curriculum and letting students know what were basic courses, what were required courses, what were experimental courses, that person was not willing to advocate advertised the course that we were offering as a experimental course that was available during the semester. So we couldn't get students who I had taught in my course in the first semester on social welfare policy, or Dr. Mincy had taught. They were the only ones, because we would talk about the course in our final classes. And we also had lots of information about child support enforcement policy, child welfare policy, and how they interacted with fatherhood. We would cover that material as part of our social welfare policy course. However, again, other students generally in the social work program were unaware of our experimental course, and we had to do all the advertising to get students enrolled on our own. Furthermore, this was sort of near the pandemic. We had some technical glitches when we went from a in class way of delivering the course to an online method during the pandemic, and some technical glitch meant that we lost a complete year of the 2-year trial period. And so, again, not knowing the mechanics of how schools have to worry about what courses are experimental, what courses are part of the general curriculum, and the procedure one has to go through to move from an idea to a well-developed curriculum to a course adoption. This is part of the task associated with doing the work that you are interested in doing. And I'll let Dr. Mincy talk about her on-the-ground perception of how this worked out at Columbia.
Hi, everyone. First of all, this is an amazing program that worth developing further, worth moving as accurately as we can to get it stable in colleges and universities across the country. One of the things that I was so happy to hear Fran said again, that a lot of the colleges or universities, they see family only as mother and child, and fathers don't, how should I say, are not involved. And one of the things I discovered as I taught the course was encouraging the students about the importance of fatherhood, and not only taking the curriculum from where it was, but also figure out a way to marry it with, community-based organizations, from different agencies to come in and to partake in the course to get the students more interested in it. One of the things that I actually did, and Dr. Johnson is on here as well, who was one of invited guests. Alan was also, and several others across the country that we knew were into the fatherhood program, to get them to participate within the program, and that worked well for them. A lot of the students don't have the background, even though they're required to take a social welfare policy class. They did not have the background and got nervous when the word policy comes up. They start shaking, and thought that the course was hard. They also think that social welfare policy class was hard as well. And because of that, they get a little nervous about taking the course. And again, the pandemic didn't help. I had students from different parts of the world within the class, different times. But one of the things that I thought was more exciting, for me anyway, was the students that were registered in public policy course, not in social work school, but in oh gosh, in the other programs. So yeah, I can't think of the name right now. But students who were public policy students did superbly well in the course rather than students who were
Clinical.
were clinical. And in so doing, I realized that, oh, the clinical students didn't have the policy background, and therefore they think the course was extremely hard. And because of that, their performance wasn't well. They were not, they didn't have the kinds of background that they should have had. And having taught social welfare policy, I realized that a lot of these students were missing the critical parts of putting a program like this forward. The other thing that I thought was distressing was that I'm going to repeat myself, that even within the School of Social Work, they see family as mother and child, and they exclude fathers. And so it was a lot of work to do to get them to be interested, in the program at the time. The other part of it is, Ron and we talk about this, that I thought that the course, if it's going to be offered, that students should have a prerequisite, meaning that they should take a social welfare policy class, which give them the foundation, so that when they take this course, even though it's an elective, they would have a lot of the information. They would understand the program better. They would understand how government work or the policy work, how the organizations, community-based organization work, and that would make the program even much more successful.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So I just want to close out on this point. Again, and this must be the case at social work, master's degree programs in social work everywhere. In order to get an experimental course through from an experimental course to a permanent course, students have to enroll during the trial period, and students generally have to think that the course was productive, worthwhile. What we found was, again, the clinical students didn't have the background.
Right.
And so, and they thought, since it was framed as a policy course, the course would be difficult and they would be less likely to enroll in the first place. That meant that it was difficult to get the recruitment on the front end to get a lot of students involved, right? But then on the back end, once the clinical students were admitted, and fundamentally, those are the students who we want to reach, because they end up being the practitioners in the field who are actually going to touch these families. So if the course we couldn't have a prerequisite for policy, because that would lower the number of students who would enroll in the course. But we had this cliff that we had to jump over, which is a minimum number of enrollment in the first place, and students had to again think that this course was accessible to them, not too difficult, and so forth. That's a good example of what I mean by you have to know the rules of the game, right? So that the course has to have the right number of prerequisites. You have to figure out what number of years must you be successful in a trial course, and then how to give the students the appropriate background so that they can enter in, gain the material, and so forth. And again, not even after being at the school for 15 years prior to this course, lacking that information about how the rules of the game worked at my school, at our school, we were not successful in getting in this trial period. Thank you.
And the last part of this, which for me was almost a shocker, we had something like about 20 students enrolled, and I the last time the course was taught, and I'm checking and the numbers keep decreasing. I'm like, what's going on here? Come to find out, someone who was registering the student switched the number, the course number, and the students were pulled from, the fatherhood course into another course. And by the time we tried to get them to do it, the students they couldn't rechange it. So a lot of it has to do with administration, have to do with the understanding the importance of the course, and make sure that the protocol is important. Make sure that they do what is necessary to get the students involved. But that was really it's a huge disappointment, because we had so many students, and the fact that somebody actually switched the
The course
the
number.
course number, and so we lost the students. And then
Yeah, yeah,
by that time, the program were no longer
Eligible
for the trial.
right. Now, this is amazing. Thank you, Dr. Raminci, Dr. Flaminci. This is amazing. Thank you for your feedback. Thank you for your efforts at being champions at Columbia University's School of Social Work. We look forward to your continued input in this conversation. Thank you so much. Um, and at this time, we'll bring to the virtual stage Dr. R. Anna Hayward. Um, so Dr. Hayward is an associate professor at the School of Social Welfare at Stony Brook University.
Excuse me,
And
Alan. Just before you do that, we had a poll question we wanted to
oh, you
ask.
want to do the, okay,
Yeah,
sure,
Denise, you want to come off
please.
mic?
Great.
Hi, everyone. You should get a poll. Just take a few seconds to answer, and then we'll share the results.
Thank you, Denisha and team, for making that seamless. It popped right up on my screen. Alan, back to you.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Um, and so Dr. Ariana Hayward is an associate professor at the School of Social Welfare at Stony Brook University. She's been teaching the fatherhood class since 2020 and has also worked with the Long Island Fatherhood Initiative since 2011. So at this point, I will give the stage over to Dr. R. Anna Hayward, Stony Brook School of Social Welfare.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Alan. Great to hear from you all at Columbia about the fatherhood course. So I counted up yesterday. I'm actually teaching a summer section right now. So I am teaching my 12th section of the Fathers and Family course at Stony Brook since 2020. The first class, I want to talk a little bit about the format of the class because I think it's contributing to why this class is so popular and so successful. So since 2020, I have taught at least one section every spring and and sometimes two sections, and then a summer section. So when I first piloted this class in the spring of 2020, it was piloted as an online asynchronous class on the Blackboard platform. And that turned out to work out great, right? Because spring 2020, all our classes went online. And this was one class I didn't have to worry about or do anything with because they were already in this asynchronous environment. Um, I think because of that, and the following year, all of our classes were online. We just continued offering it as an asynchronous online class. Um, so we have a limit for our online classes. The limit is 25 students. So just adding up all these sections, that's approximately 300 students who are now practicing social workers in the state of New York who have had this course. So I think that as far as like how things work at Stony Brook is we have to run a new class or a special topics class twice before it can be given its own number and become a real class. And so I was able to do that sometime in 2021 or 2022. So it is not a required course for the MSW program, but it is a standard elective that's kind of in the schedule. And one of the reasons is so I teach another elective class that a lot of times has been canceled out because of low enrollment. And that's because some things with our curriculum, like our electives tend to be in the spring semester, so they all get there's competition for the slots when they can be taught. So I have had the experience with other electives being canceled, and whenever that happens, we just offer another section of the fatherhood course and it fills up immediately. There's always a wait list for this class. Like I said, the max is 20, 25 students. So for example, this spring semester that just ended, I was scheduled to teach one section of this and a different elective. The other elective did not fill. It was in person. So we added a second section of the fatherhood class and I had 50 students in that class. We have a specialization in Stony Brook for families, youth, and transition to adulthood, our FIT specialization. And I would say that probably maybe like 75% of the students who take this class are in that specialization, and it seems to fit very well with that. Our other specializations are integrated health and community action and policy practice. And this elective is open to all three of our specializations. So the policy and it's not billed as a policy class, it is policy and practice. So I try to cover both policy and practice and have assignments that reflect both, especially for those policy focused students. So every semester since the beginning, I have one of the last, so most of the class is discussion based because it's an asynchronous class. So I use the YouTube videos, various readings. I've added other material over the years, and students respond with an online discussion post and responding to their peers. So in the final week of class, I always ask an open-ended question asking for feedback, and I usually share that with Alan. And I tell them that it's going to be shared with the developers of the course. So for this, I was just going to share a little bit from this past semester. So this last semester, we ran two sections with a combined total of 49 students. So when I have two asynchronous sections, I actually just put them together into one big section, even though they're in two different classes. So students often noted that this class reshaped their understanding of father involvement and systemic barriers. Some of the themes were expanding perspectives. Like students usually find the course really eye-opening into how fathers can influence children's cognitive and emotional development. Here is a quote from a student. I didn't realize how much impact fathers can have on a child's cognitive development. The class definitely helped me understand the barriers non-custodial fathers face and why their involvement matters so much. The other kind of major theme is about a new understanding of systemic barriers and policy needs. A quote from a student, as a CPS investigator, I definitely feel that we don't take into consideration enough of the barriers that impact their ability to parent. Then another theme is fatherhood services and advocacy. They expressed enthusiasm for applying their learning to future careers and advocating for better fatherhood services. A student who worked in a hospital said, I was able to notice how little emphasis we put on providing resources for fathers or including them in conversation. Another student said we need more one-on-one counseling and groups, therapy for fathers. And then just kind of like a personal and professional impact, quote, understanding how to work with fathers, encourage them, support them, will transform my social work practice. So this is from this semester, but as Alan knows, because I usually just send him the whole report, this is the feedback that I get every single semester. Students say that they think it should be part of the curriculum, that they didn't know before, they never thought about before why they don't contact fathers. They never like kind of crossed their mind that there was kind of like a hole or something lacking in their services. And then something I found interesting too is I often get comments about the personal impact especially from students who did not have their father involved in their own personal lives. So, one student said, I get a little, it's hard for me to read quotes when they're emotional because I get choked up. Sometimes it was a little triggering for me because once my parents separated, my father was no longer involved in my sister and my lives. This class brought to my attention some reasons why my father may not have been involved because of the trauma he had experienced growing up. So I thought that was really moving. A lot of times, especially the the female students will talk about their own father loss. No, this is a graduate class. This is for MSW students, usually in their last semester. Their last semester, somebody asked if it was undergrads. And then another student, a male student said, I was fortunate to have an amazing father, but many of my teammates on the football team were not fortunate. My father grew up not knowing his dad, and through him, I learned how overlooked fathers are in America. Learning how to support fathers and have difficult conversations was valuable. I appreciate how this course expanded my understanding of the importance of fatherhood programs. And then I'll usually have like maybe one dad in the class who will talk about how the course content actually changed his own perspectives on fathering. So, overall, like the commentary, the quotes from students are oftentimes very moving and really point to the need for this in the social work curriculum. So I think that's it for my report back. I just wanted to kind of share some of those comments. I'm teaching it right now. So I do like a 6-week class. So all the content is pushed into 6 weeks, also online asynchronous. Um, but it's been a great experience. The school appreciates it. And again, like the doing it online just kind of gets around those like scheduling and competitive pieces because students can fit this in and still take other electives. So I'm happy to answer any questions. I don't know if there were other questions in the chat. Melody, yes, sure, I would be happy to, or I guess Alan can send it on.
Yeah, well, and I know I'll get your more recent feedback. So thank you, Dr. Hayward. Again, thank you, Dr. Hayward, Stony Brook School of Social Work. I keep saying social work, but thank you for your efforts at being a champion of this work. Again, Drs. Mincy. And before we move on, I will just ask one question. And you don't feel free, you don't have to answer this now because we're going to continue to move, but please keep this in mind as you give your feedback in the breakout sessions or at other points in today's conversation. Just again, thinking about who would be the best champions at schools of social work to help to advance the fatherhood social work curriculum. And again, how can OCSS or the Children's Cabinet, DYCD, other agencies support or inform their efforts? And again, do you have thoughts again on how we can move this effort forward? And so just any thoughts on that uh, as we continue this conversation. And again, you can feel free to share your feedback in the breakout sessions or at other points today when we get feedback from all the other principals around the table. Thank you. And again, I'll turn it back to Mike. I believe we're going to have our second poll question. Is that right?
Yes, thank you.
Yep.
So Denisha, if you'll share the results from the first poll and then
Yep.
raise the second.
All right. So, okay, we have most people feeling somewhat confident that their current role is equipped to support fathers. And then we're going to move on to our second question. And just take a minute just to fill that out, and then we'll share the results as well.
Thank you, Denisha. Hopefully folks are taking the time to respond to the second poll, and thanks for responding to the first. Thank you again to Professor Mincy, and Professor Hayward and Alan for facilitating that conversation. It's now my pleasure to join Alan and welcome some other academicians and experts to enter into this discussion. And Dr. Mincy mentioned that we had a prior conversation about some of this in February, and the topic was so rich that we asked um, these representatives to return and to discuss some of these issues with a much wider audience. Here I want to acknowledge Hunter College, who we would have had join us, but it's also a Hunter graduation. So that's a legitimate excuse why they are not here. But at a future point, we hear additional feedback from Hunter. It's now my privilege to recognize some colleagues who have agreed to react to what has been discussed and to open this up in other directions. I'm going to read from their bios. Excuse me if I abridge somewhat just in the interest of time, but I've asked my team to collect all the bios so that we can share with attendees from today. First, I'll recognize Dr. Jeffrey Johnson, President of the National Partnership for Community Leadership. I know he is going to have to step away and return to the conversation, but Dr. Johnson serves as the President and Chief Executive Officer of the National Partnership for Community Leadership, and since 1997, he and NPCL have convened an an annual international fatherhood conference that attracts thousands of community-based practitioners around the world. Under Dr. Johnson's leadership, NPCL managed the National Youth Development Practitioners Institute on behalf of the U.S. Department of Labor, the Ford Foundation, and the Charles Stewart Mott Foundation. I also want to welcome Dr. David Pate from University of Wisconsin-Madison. Dr. Pate's research projects have involved examining the effects of social welfare policy on Black adult males' life course events through qualitative research methods. His research examines the social and economic determinants of poverty for Black males, as well as variables such as the involvement with the Child Support Services Program, legal barriers, and previous traumatic experience that may affect their adult well-being. I want to welcome Dr. Moretta McDonald, an award-winning teacher and sociologist, currently an affiliate faculty member in the sociology department at Virginia Tech, where she has created and taught classes like the sociology of Cardi B, who I think I want to audit that, and fatherhood and the criminal justice system, as well as the sociology of family. Dr. McDonald is also an adjunct assistant professor at St. John's University in Queens, where she has taught anti-Blackness across the globe and racial capitalism. I'd like to welcome Dr. Lena Green, who currently serves as the executive director of the Hope Center, a community-based mental health clinic in Harlem, connected to the historic First Corinthian Baptist Church. She is an associate professor and project manager in population health science and policy at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai Hospital, and a clinical professor at both NYU and Columbia University's School of Social Work. I'd like to welcome Dr. Kiana Crier-Coupe, BSW Program Director and Associate Professor of Social Work in the Andrew Young School of Policy Studies at Georgia State University. Her research program explores the drivers of health and wellness among fathers and the impact of father involvement and engagement on child, caregiver, and community well-being. Dr. Crier-Coupe's work has been funded by the the Fatherhood Research and Practice Network, the Health Resources and Services Administration, and the North Department of Health and Human Service. I'd like to welcome Professor Kevin Roy, a PhD and professor in the Department of Family Science at the University of Maryland College Park School of Public Health. He's recognized as an expert in the field of fatherhood research with 2 decades of experience working with low-income families and community-based parenting programs. His research focuses on the life course of young men on the margins of kin networks and the workforce as they transition into adult and fatherhood. I'd also like to welcome Dr. Derek Gordon, a licensed clinical community psychologist and an associate professor of psychiatry, psychology section, Child Study Center, and public health at Yale University School of Medicine and Division of Prevention and Community Research. He brings more than 20 years of experience as an evaluator of community-based programs focused on the broad health of disenfranchised communities, where he successfully partnered with constituent groups to help them and develop iterative strategies to document their process, implementation, and outcomes. And finally, last in name, but certainly not least in standing, Dr. James Rodriguez, MSW, international leader, speaker, and advocate for children's well-being. His leadership in various fields, including early childhood education, public health, child welfare, social work, leadership development, and fatherhood practitioner, have allowed him to make a significant impact. He's recognized for establishing one of the initial fatherhood programs supported by Temporary Assistance for Needy Families in Arizona. This program has had multiple replications of it, and he's responsible for over 75 million focused on national fatherhood initiatives. So that's a huge panel. We're very thankful for their breadth of experience, and they've all carved out time to be part of our discussion today. And the team has come up with a few questions, which we will pose openly. Any of them can come off mic to respond to these. And so we'll use the next little bit of time to hear their reactions to what's been discussed as they reflect on these questions. And so my first among them are, what practical skills and training do new providers need to better engage fathers, particularly those who feel disconnected from systems of support? And so in no particular order, anyone is welcome to come off mic and respond to that. I would also invite our colleagues from Columbia and Stony Brook if they wish to weigh in on these issues. First question: what practical skills and training do new providers need to better engage fathers, particularly those who feel disconnected from systems of support?
I'll start the conversation, Michael. Thanks for inviting me. And I want to thank Dr. Hayward for that really great conversation she has with her students. I think that one of those places where you can see or see I know I've seen a real big need is in schools of social work, where we don't talk about men as fathers, men as workers, men as providers. We may, and we don't talk about them in the context of a family. So I think from the academic side, when we're working with students who are going to be providing case management and service to families, that they often should think of that father as another member of that family, who may or may not be involved, but oftentimes, from my experience, is involved. And for those who are social workers or people who do work in the field, it's more of a conversation that hopefully we can begin in places like this, where you talk about the recognition of men as parents. I just think that we don't do it often enough, and I think some of us perpetuate that's a role that only the mother can be as a caregiver. But a lot more research, such as those on this panel, I know Kevin and others have done some really great work at looking at how men as caregivers is a reality, and hopefully more opportunities to have sessions like this will allow that to happen. So I'm going to stop there because I know a lot of great voices are on here, but I just wanted to not have you sit there by yourself and not hear anything from any of us. So I'll pass it on to someone else.
I appreciate your dignified leadership from a fellow fraternity brother. You mentioned Professor Roy, and so Professor Roy, if you'd like to speak, and Dr. Rodriguez, I'm sure you want to weigh in on this as well.
Thank you so much, David. Thanks so much. A couple thoughts, and I come from a school of public health, and as I was hearing about the curriculum experiences, I teach a course called Man Up, and we've been doing it since 2017. It's not a required course. It's mostly for freshmen and sophomores, first-year students, or coming in, and we started it as a fatherhood course with a discussion of masculinity on the back end, and we found out that we flipped the course and really focused it on masculinity in men and fatherhood on the back. We've worked with over 1,500 students since 2017. It's always sold out. We always sold out, oversubscribed. We teach it winter, spring, summer, and fall. And the discussion that we have, a lot of it is focused on assumptions that we have about men, in this kind of family-centeredness that we think about, particularly from a public health perspective. We usually think of men as good because they're good for children, but not good in and of themselves, not worth intervention, not worth, resources, let's say. Men are perceived as being problematic for other people's health, women and children, other men, as well as their own health. right? And so if you think about in public health, we study, I have a program in my department, which is MCH, maternal child health. There's no mention of men in this. And even if we take a family perspective, even if we teach a family-centered model, oftentimes men are the problematic part of that model, right? And we've begun to challenge that and critique that. And I think of the work of scholars like John Rich, who've said, these are not problem people, problem men. We are looking at toxic environments in which men strive to become engaged and become healthy and be healthy in each other's lives and other people's lives. Those are some of the I think things we need to really challenge in our courses. And one of the ways I do it is when we take a developmental perspective, both in terms of men's own development, their sense of masculinity and engagement with families, but also child development, what they can do to promote child development. How do we reach the point where we are so invested in young people, particularly young boys, let's say, and we're worried about them, we want to invest in them and support them, they become the young men that we vilify. And we've talked about this for decades in our communities, right? What is that transition like? We're still stuck on that. Policymakers are still stuck on that. The way we teach in social work and public health is still stuck on that transition, that we don't know how we are taking men and make them problematic in a family setting. And so what I try to do is I engage students in this. And over 2/3 of the students who take this typically are young women, which is interesting. So men are not taking this course voluntarily. The large majority of men who do take it and step up are young black and brown men. White men do not take this course. And I think it's very interesting. So, we try to engage students at University of Maryland around this, but getting them early on, upstream, before they're in a master's program, before they become social work students, which a lot of them do, I think is a way to get them engaged in fathering much earlier than we might have just, as a required course in a master's program, for example. So we pair it with a course on working with families, and then we kind of bring in the discussion on men in a non-required course that students are interested in. So anyway, thanks.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pate and Dr. Roy. Dr. Rodriguez, I believe you wanted to weigh in. And Dr. Johnson, before we lose you, if you'd like to come off mic and share your thoughts, that would be welcome.
Thank you, Commissioner Bobbitt. But I want to go back to Ron in that his struggles or his explanation of the journey to get his course in CU. The Council of Social Work Education, when we do community-based education programs, I have found it at different levels at University of Southern California when I was an instructor over there, faculty professor at the School of Social Work, and at Arizona State University. If the course is designed to meet those community competency-based education requirements, I believe there's 9 of them, they may have changed it since then, it's easier to get it through. The difficulty is the ownership of the content or the intellectual property. Jeff Johnson, for an example, Dr. Johnson has a wonderful program. We've created one called an Advanced Practitioner Education Training Program, and the entire program is set up with modules with CSWE, APA, and NASW formatted ways of evaluating each content area so that it could be, and has been approved for CE use. The downside of it is there's a School of Social Work here in California where I'm at. They wanted to take ownership of it. And then the faculty that were going to instruct it, my colleagues in social work, had no background in the fatherhood field. So the professional development of social workers has been lacking for decades. And there's really not a home for it. And I've always felt, and I'm glad that Ron is on here and Dr. Hayward, I've always felt, why isn't the School of Social Work leading the cause or family development? Because there has to be a way where we can expand the knowledge base before everyone else has gone on to emeritus status or emerita status. And that's what I think the next wave of practitioners could come from, future social work professionals, yet it's lacking. And so how do we create community-based educations that meet CSWE standards so that we can give it to and work with institutions like Columbia or Stony Brook, it doesn't really matter, or Cal State, Los Angeles, or Arizona State University, so that it can also foster into the school social work. And that's one of the areas that I hope can grow out within the next few years. And I know NASW could be a partner in it. And I don't know if they're here at the table right now, but maybe that could be the next step.
Thank you, Dr. Rodriguez.
Okay.
And then if you're with us, Dr. Johnson, please jump
Yeah,
on.
I want to come at it a somewhat different way, in the sense that, you know, I've been doing this work for 36 years, and I've been working on curriculums and training over that period of time, and I think that some of it has a place in a university setting, in preparing schools of social work, and others maybe in schools of psychology and education for work with fathers. But I do think that if we cannot get them in the universities, we need to go to the places where they work. You know, for example, one of the projects that we worked on over the years, we actually went into the Department of Social Services in the city of Richmond, who had 95 case managers, social work backgrounds, and we did a father-friendly assessment, and we did a training on fatherhood. And we asked the fundamental questions initially in our survey was, how many of you had social work backgrounds? How many of you have actually worked with men and fathers or learned about men and fathers in social work schools? And none of them did. But the fact that we were there was an opportunity the very first time for many of them to get exposed. So if we can't get them in the university, we can go into those settings where they are, because some of these trainings and other materials are very transportable and they can be done in that way. And so I don't want us to think that a university setting is the only way in which we can equip social workers with information about fatherhood. I also want to address the practical question part of what I received in terms of questions. What are the practical skills and training do providers need to better engage fathers? Well, some folks have touched on it, but let me kind of deal with it in a very square manner. First of all, we have to, you know, meet them where they are. You know, fathers are each one of them are different. My mother lived to 94 years of age, and she said, she only gave me one piece of parenting advice ever. And she said, love them the same and treat them different. And I think that that's how we have to work with fathers. We have to love them the same, but treat them within the lived experiences that they are going through right now. You know, and that is critically important in terms of meeting them where they are, in terms of something practical. The other thing is understanding that irrespective of the barrier, that we have to assume that the father wants to be involved in the life of his child first. Because once we can establish that, then we can be saying, well, if he wants to be involved, what are the barriers? And then what things have to happen in order to eliminate those barriers? Some of those things could be personal. Some of those things may be employment oriented. A lot of it has to do with working, understanding mom. Another practical thing to do in working with fathers is to have some intentionality in getting to understand the father-mother relationship, whether or not they're together or not. For the most part, when you work with low-income fathers, it's probably not, right? And so you still have to understand mom's situation, because for the child's sake, they need to be connected to both sides of the family. And it may not be a communication with the mom in the support system, but it might be the mom's sister or the mom's brother, you know, that might be brought into focus around working with, helping and support that father. I think that the other thing is that when fathers show up, we need to be very clear on what their needs are, right? I can tell you the problem with retention in programs is because we don't meet fathers where their needs are. And that does not mean that the program has to do everything, but your referral network should, right? because you can't do everything. There's no one size fits all. There's no one agency going to provide all the services the fathers need, but through your understanding of what his needs are, the ability to form partnerships in the community to be able to address some of those needs and make sure they're functional. All right, because the worst thing you can do is send fathers to an agency and you say that you sent them, and then when the guy shows up and he says that you sent them, and the person has a mixed look on their face and said, I don't know who you're talking about. And so, what I invite fatherhood programs do at a practical level, any partner that you have before you form the partnership, let them come down and see you in your program and to see exactly what you're trying to do. Do the eyeball test, do the ear test, because fatherhood is something that you can see and it's something that you can hear, right? At a very practical level. And then I guess the final thing I would say is that it's understanding, again, the lived experiences of these fathers, all right? Every father that you serve may not come from the same neighborhood. So as you're providing services, location is very important, and make sure the location is a location that's accessible to them and one they feel are not fearful of going down. And so in other words, your programs as they map themselves out, it has to be mapped out in a way that allows for accessibility of fathers who are familiar with that locality and are not crossing tracks and doing some of those other things that might work against them staying involved in the program. And again, I think that I would suggest, and I can tell you over the 36 years I've done this work, I have worked and I'm going to say educated. 50% of all of my trainees are social workers, right? And they come through and they go through our training and they leave better equipped. And so I would just like to put that on the table and just to say that there is a way of sharpening the saw of those folks who are in school and those people who are out and working with nonprofits, like our organization and others, is an opportunity window for those of you trying to make sure that whoever's working with fathers has an understanding of what this work is about and how to meet fathers where they are and to help them achieve their goals of personal fulfillment as well as their fulfillment of being a dad. I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Dr. Johnson. I want to thank all of the folks who have weighed in so far and raise another question. I think some of your responses anticipated what might have been our second question. I'm going to move on to another question. And I do want to encourage some of our panelists who haven't already weighed in, Dr. Green, Dr. Cryer-Coupade, Dr. McDonald, you may want to respond to this. Dr. Johnson, you said it can't all be solved by academia, but I do want to ask the group ways in which either City University of New York or other New York City academic institutions can help ensure their curricula align with the realities of community-based fatherhood work. So if anyone on the panel would care to weigh in on that, or if the panelists identified you want to weigh in on the prior question, I just haven't had a chance to have the mic is now yours.
If I can jump in, Mr. Barrett, I want to kind of actually maybe bridge the two questions that you've raised.
Thanks, Dr. Quinn.
And one of the things I was thinking about is the first question talked about skills training and what do you see the skills training that need. And what I found interesting across the responses that have been made is that there's a recognition that at all levels, we need to be thinking about how we integrate fatherhood work into the kind of our thinking and the work that we're doing at a community level. And so be it from a service provider kind of promotores perspective, folks who are kind of lay workers doing the work, making sure that they have the skills to actually engage families, including fathers, at the undergraduate level, kind of thinking about kind of how we integrate it into the curriculum that is being taught to students at the undergraduate and graduate level. But for a number of the disciplines that are there, the training doesn't just end after you've had the academic credentials. So for example, I'm a psychologist, and as a psychologist, I have to do training post my degree. And so kind of ensuring that the folks that are providing the kind of supervision and oversight of the work are also informed and thinking and engaging the trainees in these issues, I think become really critical. And so when we think about how do we kind of from an academic perspective make sure that the services are delivered across the spectrum, that's what I'm thinking about. Is kind of thinking about where is the individual on the continuum? How can I help to foster their development within that? And this is a piece that we need to be thinking about, and I use the royal we here, but do I have the skills and credentials in order to foster that? Because I think there's an assumption, maybe that I'm wrong here, but the assumption that everyone who interfaces with the systems are as equipped as we are in dealing with these issues. And so maybe what we should also be thinking about is, are we helping organizations, local, academic, whatever, do some kind of self-assessment to understand what their strengths and weaknesses are around these issues, and then build capacity such that they're able to more effectively integrate this work in a more seamless and I think more planned way. Because as it stands right now, it feels a bit hodgepodgey, if I can say it that way. And I think that there's a way in which, and if we think about it, other services, and this is not about a competition thing, but other services are less that way. And so is there something for us to systematically kind of think about that? Are there ways in which we can, APA, American Psychological Association, just put out a practice guideline for working with men and boys? Within that are all the disciplines putting out these kinds of working documents, and is this work embedded in that conversation? So I just want to put that out there kind of for us to be thinking about, and kind of think how we expand our work and expand our thinking around that.
Thank you, Dr. Gordon. I know Dr. McDonald wanted to weigh in, and then Dr. Green, please.
Thank you for this opportunity to be here. I kind of wanted to answer a different question. There was another question we had that was, what are the barriers that prevent social work and human services from being truly father inclusive, and how can policy help remove those barriers? So because I am more in the policy realm, this question really spoke to me. And also to respond to Dr. Rodriguez, I think that all disciplines should teach courses on fathers and fatherhood. Like the course that I taught at Virginia Tech, it was to students graduating in criminal justice, to allow them to know that the people they are encountering are not just men or women, but parents, and more specifically fathers, since men are more likely to be involved in the criminal justice system. But as a sociologist, I look at the structural um, backgrounds, structural things that impact personal experiences. And I think it's important that we look at the way the state and policies constrain how men are able to father, and the ways that they father, whether it's stigmatized or appreciated. And so we know that, like, in our society, fathers are more likely looked at as the breadwinners, which is the impetus for child support policy, and that if they're not married, heterosexual, or living in the home, their contribution as fathers are less likely to be unconsidered, right? And we talk a lot about father engagement, but are we talking about it in the ways that fathers, like on the ground, are engaged, or based on these broad, grand ideals, right? And so when we think about how policy constrains fathers, there are few public programs that even give single fathers any kind of support, right? One of the few is SNAP, right? But that has some very heavy work requirements in order to participate even in that program, right? When we think about working fathers and human resources and their jobs, as a child support worker, um, multiple fathers came to me talking about this, telling me how they lost their jobs because they went to one too many child meeting at the child's school, or one too many doctor's appointments, because women are expected to do that labor. And when they do it, they're seeing more slackers in many of these industries that men work at, right? We can even talk about the tax code for single non-resident fathers, right? The single status as a tax is like the most taxes that they'll take out your check, even though they have the same financial responsibilities as a resident father or a resident mom, but they don't receive any other benefits because our society doesn't consider them a good father if they're not living in the home. And so even though I recently learned that New York State does have in their tax code, and it's the only state that has it, in their tax code, that non-resident fathers paying their child support, they get a tax break. And so when I was doing work in the federal government, we were researching that to see if there's a way to extend that throughout the country. And so I just think that social work and human services, we need to think more about the structural barriers that don't allow or constrain the way men can be fathers, and also integrate different ways that men father. And instead of, this one way of a breadwinner or living in a home or going to school plays where they may just meet them at the park and play football, coach their teams. So that is what I wanted to say about that.
Thank you, Dr. McDonald. And now we'll hear from Dr. Green and Dr. Carrera Coupe, and then it'll come back to me and we're going to transition. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks again for hosting this and just giving us all an opportunity to weigh in. So coming to you all as someone who not also teaches in a classroom, but also has implemented fatherhood programs and services on the ground and started those things from scratch, also coming from the world of maternal child health. So just weighing in on a couple of things just from that area and running programs also for the city, specifically the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene for several years. So one, just thinking about some of the curricula that are already available that I think do a good job of training and centering fathers successfully. I've used those also with some modifications as a clinical social work and psychotherapist by training and profession. So I think that there are several curricula already available. So thinking about the National Fatherhood Initiative and NFI, as well as some additional I think curricula that are more centric and more focused, on culture and race. I think those are also helpful. And then just thinking about some of the things that I had to sort of add on to my work both in the classroom and then also on the ground. So thinking about parenting as a stage of development as well. I think is an important thing for us to address. Oftentimes, we're also not specifically talking about the mental health of fathers. With the mental health of men. So specifically also even looking at separating between young fathers and older fathers, also looking at depression, specifically thinking through perinatal depression and perinatal paternal mood disorders. So including some of those things, also co-parenting. I would also add, and I'm trying to be quick in the interest of time, thinking about bias awareness and bias training, as well as cultural humility. And then the last thing I would add here, I made a little note to myself, is making sure that we are including fathers, in the design of the curriculum, right? We don't want to miss those voices because they are the ones who are going to help guide us and let us know if what we're actually even doing is even effective. And then the last piece I'll say is making sure that we are including how to navigate systems and resources. I forget who said it. I can't remember if it was Dr. Johnson or someone else, that, coming in and being able to help folks also includes a host of resources, and knowing how to navigate those systems is critically important to be able to successfully meet the needs of those dads on the ground.
Thank you, Dr. Green, Dr. Carrera Coupe.
Oh, Child and Family Services, but Elizabeth Garland and
there we are. Thanks again. And so I just wanted to bring it back to this idea of thinking about practical strategies that we could potentially implement. So Alan and I think now a few years ago, spoke about the curriculum. I was at North Carolina State University at the time and dealt with some of the same issues that Dr. Mincy dealt with in terms of being able to get a course approved in that department. And so when I moved to Georgia State University, one of the things that I was able to do was to offer an interdisciplinary elective. And I called it the Black Fatherhood Mixtape. So this class only focused on Black fathers, but it came from multiple perspectives. And so part of this was thinking about when people leave this university or as they're working on the degrees, like who are they going to encounter in the community? So students sat with me on the first day of class to say, these are the issues that I'm interested in related to fatherhood. I had students from design, biology, social work, psychology, you name it, they were there in that space. And so each week we talked about some pressing issue in a way that brought in art and culture and music, and even kind of thinking about inclusive design and settings. And so there was someone from child support who came in and kind of showed a picture of their space, and there were pictures of children and nothing that had anything to do with a father in that space. And so if we're saying we want you to come in this space, and in North Carolina, for example, they changed from child support enforcement to child support services. If we're offering services and I don't see myself on the walls or in that space, why would I come here and think this is a warm and inviting space? And so I think in terms of developing curricula, what can be helpful for those outside of New York in terms of being able to adopt what you all have developed in New York, it's great that you've made the modules available. And I think folks will need resources to, for instance, like the last module on child support services, to take that and to actually include the history from their states. And so as we're thinking about organizations who might be able to undergird this work, I think the Grand Challenges may be a space that we go to see if they have supports for making sure that this happens, or working with NAD, our National Association of Deans and Directors, to say, this is an issue that we're interested in. We want to find ways to incorporate this into social work curricula. Can you all get on board to help with that? I think that that also will be another important space. But in terms of making this work practical and applicable, I think we have to meet fathers where they are. And so part of that is perhaps inviting them into our classroom spaces. And so in the class that I mentioned to you all, each week there was a different professional or father from the community that came to the university, or we entered their space to make sure that we were making that connection. And it's not just us in the ivory towers kind of talking about what's happening with fathers, but we're hearing from pediatricians who are working with fathers. We're hearing from educators who are working with fathers. We're hearing from fathers who are returning to community to help us to better make sure that we have a solid understanding there. So thank you all for moving this work forward.
Thank you so much. I want to thank again all our panelists for participating in this sort of second segment of the day, and join Alan and others in thanking those that have been piloting the work in New York City. Quick time check and talk about next steps. It's now 3:23. We initially intended for this to run 90 minutes and close at 3:30. If you were in our position and you had this much expertise, you would let folks talk for the length of time that they spoke. And so I'm very thankful for all those responses. And what I'll ask is those that can stick around for another 10 to 15 minutes, we may close at 3:45 rather than 3:30. If you have to leave at 3:30, we certainly understand. But with the next segment of the day, we figured that everyone who was in attendance had their own expertise. And so while we wanted to hear from our colleagues at Columbia and Stony Brook, and colleagues from Hunter sent their best regards, we have heard from so many others who have practical experience and institutional insight, but we want to give you a chance to mix it up. So I'm going to ask Denisha first to post the results of the last poll, ask our third poll, and then we're going to move to instructions, because we're going to go to breakouts, which will give you an opportunity to weigh in directly. And I will say, because of the participation of the Children's Cabinet as well as DYCD's and HRA's ongoing interest, we really want to hear what comes out of the breakouts. So we'll be joining, and any of the academics or experts who are able to stick around are also invited to select the breakouts that work for them as well. Stick around, a little bit more to come. So Denisha, if you can do the poll results, ask the last poll, and then we'll move to the breakouts.
Sure. Here we go. So from our second question, as for what is the biggest barrier to engaging fathers in the services your program provides, we have most indicating a bias stigma toward fatherhood involvement. All right, you can see the results there. I am going to ask the third questions now. I'm going to open up the breakout rooms, and before everyone joins, I will just ask the facilitators to join on originally, and then I'll let everyone know when it's okay to go in. All right, and so in the meantime, let me pull up the third question.
So again, our final question. Okay, you have it on screen. Great. And so Denisha, people can move to the breakout that most interests them, correct?
Yes, you
So
have the choice to go to whichever one.
I
Yeah.
think the
So
poll question is, sorry.
say again?
I think the poll question disappeared.
Yeah, can you put the poll question back up, please, if it's not closed? And we have 6 breakouts, and so I'll quickly review those. Room 1, bias and bias and barriers. What biases, conscious or unconscious, have you observed in services or education that limit how fathers are perceived or supported? So that's number 1. Number 2, inclusive practices. How can services or training better support inclusive engagement of diverse fathers, e.g., non-resident, LGBTQIA+, young fathers, etc.? Number 3, workforce and training development. What training or professional development has helped you or your staff prepare work with fathers? Number 4, curricula and academia. Are there academic gaps or missed opportunities in current curricula that reinforce outdated family models? Number 5, best practices. Have you seen programs, policies, or partnerships that effectively center fathers? What made them work? And number 6, designing father-friendly systems. What changes would make services or institutions more father-friendly from the ground up? So breakouts will run for 10 minutes, and then those that can return will do a very quick wrap up after those 10 minutes. Thank you so much, and hope to see some or most of you shortly.
All right, I'm going to give everyone just a few more seconds to finish the poll questions, and then I will open up the breakout rooms. Alrighty, I am going to close the polls now. So if you have an answer you want to give, just give it really quickly. Alrighty. And so, how can you or your organization or university be more father inclusive in your curriculum and or student work? And what would most support that inclusion? Most have indicated culturally responsive engagement strategies. All right, and then so let us go to the rooms. I'm going to open up all the rooms. Again, facilitators, you're aware of which room you're going into, so just head on in there and yeah.
Scott, place me where I'm supposed to go, please.
Are we going to select the breakout room or you going to put us?
We're supposed to go to room 6.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to access it.
I don't see an option to choose. I was wondering if it's someone else that is going to place us there.
Let me get
Let
Denisha.
me
Let me
let
get
me
Denisha on the
see.
line.
Yeah, everyone should be able to choose.
I see the list when you do more, but I don't see how you select the group. Okay. Oh, okay.
3. I see an invite to room 3.
Yeah, you closed it all out.
Yeah.
Did something happen?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that,
for
All closed it out.
okay, for some reason,
I just got kicked out of my group. What happened?
Me too. I
no,
got got my group.
it's
You know,
definitely Zoom. Let me see.
just when we were getting warmed up, right?
I know. Yeah.
Okay. All right, let me see. Does anyone see the breakout option on
No, it's not
their
on there.
end?
Not yet.
I see it, but it's room 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I don't even know what my number I was.
5.
Oh, well, okay. Thank you.
I mean, I was either it was
Okay.
practice, right?
Okay, hold on. Go to more breakout room.
1 is bias and barriers. 2 is inclusive practices. 3 is workforce training and development. 4 is curriculum and academia. 5 is best practices. And 6 is designing father-friendly systems.
not showing for everyone to break. Oh, there it is.
Thank you, Denisha, for managing that.
Denisha, can you move diverse to 2? Where you're supposed to be at?
Okay, hold on. Where is diverse on this list? Move to room 2. Okay, I just did. Hi, everyone. We have 1 minute left. Hi, everyone. We have 1 minute left.
No, that wasn't enough time.
No, it wasn't enough time, but we do
Never
have
is.
to
It never
respect
is. It never
folks,
is.
and I do want to again acknowledge folks who stayed longer than 90 minutes to spend this time together. So for my part, this has been a very interesting, a very positive, very robust and wide-ranging discussion. It would be hard for me to summarize most of the takeaways, but for me, a chief takeaway is that there's widespread and strong and passionate interest in this. The fact that we had as many people as we had log on, we did about 90 something people. And when we went over, we still have over 40 people who've decided to stay. So I know you want to carry on this discussion, and it's sort of the city's charge. So I'm thankful the Adams administration, thankful Asia Badi and your team of the Children's Cabinet are sort of picking up the banner that this is important and you want to find ways to extend this conversation. It led to our being able to have this sort of robust discussion that we've had today. I want to thank our colleagues at CUNY who have helped us over the past couple of years. And historically, I mentioned the youth studies certificate. We wouldn't have gotten there without DYC and CUNY elevating this discussion. So I'm happy to be a part of this. I'll turn it over to colleagues at HRA and the Children's Cabinet to close us out.
Asia?
Yeah, hi, thank you so much. I really appreciate all of the folks that stayed here and spent the time to listen to all the pieces of it. The work that we are trying to do to really help support fathers being engaged with their kids would not be successful without all your support. I'm really looking forward to the continued work as we move this needle. So thanks again, and we look forward to sort of staying in touch and letting you have some updates on the other pieces of our work. Alan?
Thank you so much again, Asia. Thank you, Mike, the DYCD team, Children's Cabinet team, CUNY, and all of the partners around the table who participated in the initial part of this wonderful and robust conversation, and those who stayed behind as well. I would just say, while OCSS, you walk into the customer service walk-in center and probably some of the other offices too, and you're going to see fathers on the walls, right? As Dr. Cryer-Capay talked about. We do, I believe, Dr. Johnson or others mentioned about, really starting with beginning with the belief that fathers, apart from something else, actively do want to be active participants in the lives of their children in a healthy way. And we at Office of Child Support Services, we do believe that. However, it also is not lost on us of how much more we have to learn. As Dr. Parker even talked about having fathers in the room with us, not just sort of speaking from an ivory tower. So I think this is our effort as leadership to try to be at this table to learn and continue to learn and to be open to do that. So again, we thank everyone for your robust sharing, all the principles around the table, and we look forward to this continued conversation. Thank you so much.
I want to invite anyone, if you had further thoughts beyond the breakouts, you can feel free to email us. I think you have our email addresses. I think you have Denisha's in particular. However, you register for the conference, and we don't have a specific date for the next conversation in this series, but I do think we all feel charged to come up with one and let you know collectively when and how we want to continue this discussion. So thank you all again for making time, spending time with us, and elevating this. Be well, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
You.
Thank you, everyone.